magic of the Sunstone. You're tuned into the Jewel Riders Archive.
Hey Jewel fans, I'm Chris.
And I'm Ronnie from the Jewel Riders Archive.
We are here today with the Circle of Friends and Greg Autore. So we've got Lisa from the Princess blog.
Hi.
And Stormy from the Avalon website.
Hello.
And resident awesome toy producer Greg Autore, who worked on Jewel Riders.
Hey.
Welcome.
Hey.
So, Ronnie, why don't you get us started with some of our topics for today? This is our annual conversation, I guess you could say, with Greg. We usually do these as written interviews, but we thought it would be really fun this time to do our Christmas conversation as a podcast.
Mm-hmm. I mean, Christmas is always that time of the year when we think about presents and toys and Santa's workshop where they have toys. So let's talk about
I'm sensing a theme of toys.
Right? Yes, dolls and toys, pretty much. And I mean, honestly, this is the time of the year that you would get those Toys R Us catalogs and you'd see all the awesome new toys that are coming out. And of course, in 1995, Princess Guinevere was on the shelves. And this year, since we're celebrating the 25th anniversary, we wanted to not only talk about the toys themselves, but some of the inspiration. So two different things with regards to the Jewel Rider dolls. Firstly, the history. So Jewel Riders came from an initial concept where it was basically a adaptation of the Dragon Riders of Pern story. So we're going to talk about that transition of how it went from Dragon Riders to Jewel Riders. And then something that was quite a bit of a fan favorite was the fact that there was supposed to be a 12-inch size fashion doll of Guinevere and possibly the rest of them, in addition to the smaller size doll action figures. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about that. That's the two main focus. And then after that, we're going to kind of talk about some other fun toy memories and toy ideas that we might have had as kids. So that's pretty much that's the start.
Yeah, so I guess to get us started, for those who don't know, Jewel Riders, which was originally a concept based on Anne McCaffrey's Dragon Riders of Pern novels, and which is kind of an odd place to start for a magical girl toy line.
But it always was. I mean, that whole series sold extremely well.
Oh, yeah.
For female readers. And so it was a good starting point for that. And it had never been exploited, in terms of TV. And there were how many novels? At least a dozen?
There's about 20, I want to say.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, you're right. Yes, because Todd McFarlane wrote a bunch, and not Todd.
Todd McCaffrey, her son.
McCaffrey, sorry.
Yeah.
And then I guess there was a daughter, too, who just started writing.
Yeah, there was just another one released in the last year or two.
Yes, and I've nenever read hers, but I read some of...
It's sitting on my shelf, unread, as of yet.
Please tell me how it is.
Yeah.
Because I read his, and it was like... it was just, it was a copy, and he kind of went back to what... Mom was doing before and just renamed. It was kind of like watching, Star Wars, Star Wars episode 7. Yeah, they just happened to be an awful lot like, 4, 5, and 6.
Oh, no. We need to blow up this big planet weapon from the not Empire.
Yeah.
So, see, now here's my idea, though, really quick, is that when you're talking about the fact that the Anne McCaffrey books had done so well with a young audience, or at least with a female audience, but was that more like teenage? Because, again, the focus of usually an animated series is going to be more kids. So I really don't think that children are reading these books, because to me, the first thing that immediately makes me think of was the fact that the Black Cauldron. Now, I don't know how successful that chronicle actually was. I mean, it sounds like it was mildly successful amongst the fantasy people, but then when Disney turned it into a children's cartoon, it just didn't jive. So that's kind of my initial red flags.
You were certainly right about that. I mean, that bombed. There certainly was a fan following of that book series, and the Disney version it took so many liberties to it that the fans didn't like it either.
It's sort of like if you ever watched that old animated Lord of the Rings.
Well,
Oh, yeah.
normally when Disney takes liberties, they're more improvements, like adding fun songs and simplifying the story in such a way where it's more intriguing. And I don't think that any of the changes that they made to the Black Cauldron were actually improvements.
You mean you didn't like Gurgi?
Gurgi like monkeys and craggies.
Exactly.
But I think there is a specific set of the Anne McCaffrey books, Dragon Song, Dragon Singer, and Dragon Drums, that focus on a younger set of characters who are musicians. Music is sort of the way they teach kids in Pern, and the musicians are the people who kind of raise children and, go on their own adventures outside of the actual dragon ride. The Harpers, thank you. I was like, I knew there was a word for it.
Yeah. I think what Robert found in that was here's a proven world that has done well. So if we take that proven world and put it into targeted animation, we can make it fit the other category too. We can expand it with TV animation and bring in a different audience and bring in different viewers, and from that viewpoint it had what the toy companies were looking for at that time. And I think I might have written out this story before, but what was interesting to me was, I was in the group at Mattel, and I was in the group called LSP, which is Large Dolls, Small Dolls, and Plush, which was basically anything but Barbie for girls. And one day I was handed that those pages that you have copies of now, which was the treatment for it. And they were like, do you know anything about Princess, or know anything about Riders of Pern? I'm like, oh, I love Riders of Pern.
I can just sense your enthusiasm.
Oh yeah, I hopped right on it. I was so excited to be on it. And I read it through, and I gave my official response to it in writing, saying, oh, we really need to do this, blah 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 blah. And then crickets. And then one day a Dragon Riders of Pern t-shirt appeared on my desk. And that was it. I never heard another word. And later I found out, no, we passed on it.
Without really more explanation?
Yeah, I was given more explanation. Now, you got to remember, in that particular scenario, I was the bottom rung. So, they don't always tell the peons what they need to know. So that was really disappointing. It was like, I was so psyched out to do that. It was literally on my list of projects for me to do, and then it kind of went away. But as what I heard from Robert was that it was all set, ready to go, that even Mattel was interested, but Anne McCaffrey got cold feet and decided that she was afraid that animation would ruin look, feel, image of the wonderful world she created, and so she pulled the plug on allowing it to happen.
Now, someone said that Anne McCaffrey didn't want people to write fan fiction of her stuff. I don't know. Is that?
Yes, that was true.
Okay, so I'm just wondering now, again, another Disney reference, but is this kind of like P.L. Travers, where she's kind of like, didn't necessarily want her thing to be envisioned by someone else? It just seems like certain creatives, they really just don't want, their literary characters turned to media. Like, that's just not necessarily what they want to do,
From reading in author's notes in Anne McCaffrey books, I always got the impression that Pern was like the world closest to her heart. The one she was more attached to than any of the other things she's written. So I cannot kind of understand that she would really want to keep it in her own hands.
Yeah, or if not in her own hands, then in the hands of somebody she would implicitly trust.
Yeah. I mean, you honestly have to say that. I mean, I love Princess Guinevere from the bottom of my heart, but every time I look at it, I wince at the animation quality.
It is a little special.
It is, and some of the shots are beautiful,
Mm-hmm.
and then they turn, and then it's like, what, which, so I can understand. I mean, I get what her issues were, and I can't say I could blame her for any of that.
Mm-hmm.
And the cartoon, from the pages that we've read, seems like it would have been aimed much more at teenagers than children. And most of the books are really more aimed at adults. So it would have been a definite change from Anne McCaffrey's vision of her world.
Mm-hmm.
It definitely was. And of course, and I can't remember now what the main character was called, but certainly Melanie was one of the primary characters of that cartoon push. It was her and her music and the dragons.
Phaleson was the son of Lessa and Falar.
Okay.
The main characters of the books.
Okay.
I think he was going to be the main male lead of that.
I guess I should have actually read that before I sent it to you. It's been a few years. Well, I was so excited when I was moving boxes the other day, and I found that folder and went, "Oh, they're gonna love this."
Absolutely.
Well, I think that Chris salivated all over it. I mean, that's exactly what you wanted. I mean, because one, you do like that literary, source. You enjoy the Dragon Riders of Pern, but also just to see what the very, very early, because to us, Enchanted Camelot was as early as it got, and we had really only learned about that within the last couple of years. So to know that there was an even earlier idea that this sprung from, it's something that has kind of been going around the fandom for some time on the internet, but no one really ever had concrete evidence to say so.
Well, and the funny thing was I was on one of the big chat groups for Pern. I don't remember which one it was. But in fact, I think I'm still technically connected, but I've asked not for notifications anymore. And someone brought it up once, and I mentioned, hey, I was there. I read it. This is what had happened. And then I got all of these, armchair quarterbacks going, she never would have done that. And I thought, look, I even gave my credentials in that statement saying, look, I was here at this time. I read this. And I talked to the producer, but anyway. So I think that shortly after I stopped following that, because those people, those fans, which it's a shame because I love Dragons of Pern. I go through Dragon's Singer and Dragon's Song probably once a year.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's how much I love it. And then Dragon Drums maybe every 2 years or so. But yeah, I love that series, and so it was really a shame that it didn't happen. And so, oh well. Yeah.
And it's funny because the whole reason why we wanted to discuss this was because when we had posted some of those materials on our social media, we just got this wave of interest from fans that were like, I had no idea that this was something that, that they had tried to base upon Pern. And that's so cool. And I love that. And I love the Pern novels and everything. So I think with successful movies that have been created since, like How to Train Your Dragon and other movies, and like how we said the Black Cauldron has a cult following, I think that there definitely would have been a cult following of a Dragon Riders animated series, but I don't know if the right market for initial release would have reacted the way that they wanted it to. Again, I just don't think that the target market was the right demographic.
Well, and the one thing I will say is, at that particular time, the I can't remember if she was the CEO or the president, but it was Jill Barad who had been running Mattel for a long time, whether she had the title or not. And she was instrumental. She was one of the people that made Barbie the gigantic success it was. And she was one of the first people really pushing for female empowerment. And then there's that whole tie-in of what happened at Mattel with the Wonder Woman and the Star Riders, which ironically I ended up stealing all of that tooling to make Disney toys. But then when I went to Kenner, I took those Disney toys and made those into Princess Guinevere. But the thing, she was so passionate about making that happen, and actually making Wonder Woman happen, and actually got a VP at Warner Brothers behind her that allowed her to change colors of Wonder Woman just to be able to do that. But so the thought of if that really happened and Jill Barad was still pushing things, because she is a force to be reckoned with, it would have been interesting to see. She wouldn't have put up with Bobot and their crap. She would have steamrolled over them and, or bought their company and said, oh, yeah, now do it. So from that aspect, I think it's very exciting. It's a very exciting possibility of what could have happened.
Well, and here's the other thing, though, is that when we talk about what could have happened, I think the way that I like to see it is, Bobot took over Jewel Riders after, Mattel passed on it. They went to Kenner. Kenner shopped around, blah, 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 blah. But when Mattel said, hey, let's try to do a magical girl property as well, and they made Tanko, yes, they had a doll line to support it, just like Jewel Riders, but Jewel Riders seem to have had a lot of other merchandise created and maybe some other tie-ins. And again, maybe because it was a smaller company, whereas Mattel, I feel like once Tanko didn't prove itself, they were kind of like, moving on. And they kind of just dropped it really quickly, where at least Jewel Riders got a second season. Internationally it did well. So I think that if it indeed was made by Mattel and even made by some place like Saban, I think that if it didn't do as well as they had hoped, that it probably would have been dropped a lot quicker. But I think that Bobot saw marginal success with Jewel Riders, that they actually kept it on. So I'm kind of glad that Mattel didn't get it. But yeah, you kind of wonder, if it had done well, would it have been like Barbie? Would it have exploded?
Yes. And a thing to keep in mind in the way that Mattel and Hasbro were structured. So I mentioned that I was in the large, small doll and plush group, and then there was the Barbie group. Okay. So those were the only two girls groups from the time period of 84 to 94. And then in boys' toys, you had things like the Wings and Wheels group, you had the action figure group, and there was another group. I think it was the Make and Play group that eventually went away. And then there was preschool. And they thought of lines in those directions, and that was actually one of their downfalls. Whereas at Kenner, I was allowed to come up with any of the role play toys I wanted or expand it any way I wanted, because it was more property based. But at Mattel, they had so many different divisions and things that they might say, oh no, this other division has to do that. And they might look at it and go, I'm not doing anything else for that property. Why would I want to do that? Mm-hmm. And so you are right that they never would have done anything else for Tanko unless the line sold.
Right.
Right. Now, one of the odd little funny things, I don't think I've said this to you, was when I was at Kenner working on Tanko, I was on calls with the team that were from Saban, and one of the head people used to be one of the head marketing people at Mattel. So that was really funny going, oh, Peter, you remember me? This is Greg.
Yeah.
So it's always funny when those things happen. Mm-hmm. It's a blast. So it's interesting to, that I think that was one of the reasons why it was pushed, that Mattel picked it up, probably was, I know that Peter, I forgot his last name now, but he was a good friend with Jill Barad, still running everything. And so I'm sure he was a huge influence bringing that in.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, and I probably took us down another rabbit hole, but
I was going to say, Jill Barad pops up on The Toys That Made Us several times, and she's always an interesting person to listen to. Somebody I would love to talk to at some point.
Oh, get her at Starbucks. Her and Chris.
Know.
It'll be a 5-hour conversation.
I'm not going to say anything else because this is recorded.
You'll have to tell us later.
Yeah, well, she's a very interesting person, and honestly, and she has her downfalls, but she absolutely was the one who made Barbie what it was, and that's why Barbie has, in my opinion, that's why Barbie died. Well, it hasn't died, but it's lost its throne.
No, she's died. I mean, because now they're trying to kind of grapple at let's try this thing. Let's make this inclusive doll. Let's try to make more diversity. Let's try to do this. And they're just trying to struggle with everything. I think it's just like how DreamWorks really showed Disney, hey, children maybe aren't as interested in traditional stuff as you think that they are. I think that that's the way that some of these other toys have shown Mattel, hey, you know what? Kids maybe just don't want the typical toys. You have to think outside the box,
Her YouTube channel is doing great.
Well, that's just because she has a following.
Interesting. Well, she certainly has a lot of stories.
That's the magic of Barbie, right? She can be anything. She can tell any story. There's those great movies they made in the early to mid 2000s of different fairy tales,
The ones
they did Rapunzel before Disney, but with Barbie and.
Well, and that was actually a tagline under when Jill was running, which was, "We girls can do anything, right, Barbie?"
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I guess
these were awesome.
Yes, the Barbie movies are amazing. I love the Rapunzel one.
They did a new one on Netflix called Barbie Princess Adventure, but they were trying to tie it into the Dreamhouse Adventure series, which is also on Netflix. And because they were trying to tie it in, it didn't go as well as when they had Barbie play a character and tell an original story.
Mm.
I also adore the Life in the Dreamhouse series.
Yeah,
because it's just so ridiculous.
You just like it because of Ken. That's why.
Well, I mean, he's hilarious, but I love Midge.
Oh,
he's
really?
Such a vintage character.
Right.
She shows up and she's in black and white from Willows, Wisconsin.
Yep, that was hilarious.
Oh my goodness gracious.
My granddaughter at 2.5 was given today her first Barbie dream house. And horses.
Oh wow!
And she knew exactly what to do. She'd had a couple Barbies that she would rip the clothes off. And the other day, I realized, wait a second, how do I get her into fashion dolls completely? And it struck me. I was at a toy show actually selling off some of my old toys, and I realized, oh, there's the answer. I went and bought her a set of Frozen fashion dolls because I thought that would be the key for her because she loved that, but it's my kids shot me photos or videos of her of the granddaughter actually exploring the house and just the Barbie dream house and just with the dolls like she's been playing with it all of her life. It was just very interesting to watch. So anyway, it's just fun to see all that in another generation, and I do think it's interesting how they have portrayed Ken in the latest movies, because I saw one the other day. I forget what movie it was, and I'm like,
what was it about?
God, that's what I'm. They went camping in the backyard.
I think that was actually the show, because that was an adventure of Dreamhouse Adventure. That was an episode of Dreamhouse Adventures.
Okay. Because okay. So it was kind of my son-in-law has a niece who has asked if I can be her grandpa. So I was at their house. So I've got one grandchild officially, and I've got at least 5 now, honorary ones. And so we were at her house and we were watching that episode, and I was just amazed that they made Ken into such a dork. And even Barbie's dad was a dork. It's like,
Oh my
we're going to make all the males dorks because we can,
Well, I think that also...
That's something that I write about a lot in my blog, too, that there's been sort of a shift in princess media where princesses now play every role. They play the hero role. They play, like, the role of the person who gets attacked by the villain. They do everything themselves, so the male characters wind up with nothing to do anymore. Whereas in the past, it was more balanced, and that balance no longer exists. And I think that's a problem because it makes it more difficult to tell believable stories.
Good for feminism, bad for writing.
Right. I mean, again, there's going to be a lot of people that are pro that, and then of course, there's other people that aren't. But I think, as Lisa and we talked about this before, is that I think that sometimes the the feminist movement is almost like anti-feminine in the sense that it's like you're so pushing to be the independent, sole person that you're almost isolating anyone who wants to be that feminine role, who wants to be that princess who gets saved. Like you're almost telling them, no, you're wrong. Like, that's not what you should be doing and everything. And I think that role play has been reflective of that. Whereas you said, the boy characters, like it used to be like, oh, I get the Ken to go along with Barbie. But I think that now there's so many stories that it's just like, well, Barbie is self-sufficient. She doesn't need Ken. So now he's kind of just there for like comic relief, essentially. Or they know their audience and they know that, hey, we're obviously broadening and becoming much more, I guess, aware that we have a gay audience. So now let's target the Ken as the gay character or target it to the gay boys so that they have someone to identify with.
Yeah, there was also an episode of Dreamhouse Adventures where I think Chelsea was trying to make a cake for Barbie and her parents for their anniversary, and Barbie had to go to a robot convention, so she video called Chelsea, and through the video call she controlled a robot to make the entire cake from another location. And it's like, if she can do that, she can basically just rule the universe.
I'm sorry. Oh my god!
Like,
when you said she had to go to a robot convention,
like Barbie is now God. Like, control beings from like 100 miles away through the phone.
Well, it's funny if you go back to Men in Black 2, the villainess in that movie said, "Gosh, all you need on this planet is a good rack, and you could run the whole planet." So Barbie
showed us that. Oh my goodness. Well, and I'll insert one thing since, Greg, you were talking about Barbie homes. Crystal Palace, please. I was always upset that there was never a castle or a carriage. So I know that there was that little fold-out castle that kind of looked like, I don't know. I mean, it looked more like Polly Pocket. But was there ever in like your blue sky ideas that you wanted to make a castle set similar to like what She-Ra did with the Mattel castle?
Absolutely, but the tooling cost to do a big full She-Ra castle is enormous. And so we knew that if that was going to happen, it would be way down the road. But I remember at one point I had to approve the look of Robert's design for the castle. And I was told, you need to approve this so that if we ever want to make one, it'll work. And I remember thinking, well, there's no way at this point that this has a chance of making it. So, and Robert's design was really unique. I liked it. So I kind of shirked my responsibilities in that point. Because otherwise I would have dumbed down his castle. So I didn't. I left the integrity of it, and in the back of my mind, I thought, well, what I can do is I could make a tower, almost like the one that I made that you saw pictures of for Enchanted Camelot. There was no artwork of that palace at that time, so that set came entirely out of my head, and so I knew once that was fully designed that wouldn't work. It's a shame. I really loved that castle, and I wish it didn't that it hadn't been destroyed, but I'm sure it was. But to offset that, we worked on several medium-sized play sets. One being the carriage. We had a couple different versions of the carriage, and it kind of opened up, like a Volkswagen Vanagon with a pop top. And so that it had areas for beds, and it was neat. It just, unfortunately, it was too much to do. So the person who designed it was really inexperienced, and it was too complex. And so I finally got back to solving that need, and that was the tent playset that was approved to go to engineer for production, and that's just like the last thing that was shown before everything was stopped. But there was also I forgot the exact name of it, but it was a magical forest playset. But you guys probably know the name better than me.
Oh, was it the Ravenwood Forest?
It might have been.
I don't know if you've ever told us the name.
Okay, so yeah, so what it was is it looked like one of the magical trees for the teleportation, or at least that was the plan for it. Although it really didn't look like the ones that showed up in the cartoon, but we knew we could kind of fix it later if we had to. And the idea was it would open up it was a big tree that would open up into a play set, and it had jewels all through it, like a Light Bright. It's funny. I had to play the commercial in my head to get the name of that.
Right.
So
right.
Exactly. Making fun with light bright.
I never had one.
Cool toy.
That is really awesome. I would have loved to have a travel tree playset.
Yeah.
And so you could light. It had a light on the inside, and then it had jewels. All the wild jewels and the regular jewels you could plug in from the outside.
Wow.
All shine. That one didn't get. That was kind of like the next one that was started after the tent. There was something else I thought of the other day that was like, oh yeah, there was another place that we did. Started. It was like maybe a cardboard mock-up of it, but now I forgot what it was. But yeah, the wagon was intended to go forward. We just hadn't finished designing it properly yet. And that would have been cool. But the thing I did like that was a minor thing, because I had to keep the price point so low on the tent, but I made sure that there were eating areas for the girls and for the animals. So there was like a crystal feeding trough that snapped onto one of the tent legs, so they could also eat. So you could have so that your horses were as much of characters as your humans were.
Well, speaking from my 10-year-old memories, I think that the carriage probably would have been my number one choice to have had, and then probably a castle playset after that. the forest probably would have been my third choice, I think. And then I think I probably would have gone for the tent. So I don't know if you guys actually ever, like, when you're creating these ideas, was it more or less just, okay, this is the best costing, so let's move forward with this? Or did you guys also use any of those potential prototype ideas in, like, play tests or anything like that? Or how exactly did that approval process go?
Well, once a line was approved, you didn't have to go through much more testing. They didn't often go back into testing once a line was approved. Although we did do that with G.I. Joe. Mm-hmm. When we decided to start going a different direction, we tested a new direction there. But you hit on what the answer was. The answer was, from their formulas, they decided, okay, if this is a $4.99 doll and a $6.99 doll, I forget the price points now, that the play set or accessory set that would go with it could only be, 1.5 times the price of the highest doll or something like that.
Oh, is that how it is?
They had a formula, and so they knew at least beginning you couldn't go over that. And it wasn't until the line would reach like 30 million in sales, then they would have said, okay, now you can do the play set, because in order to do the play set, your price point is over $20, which you don't, at that time, you didn't make toys over $20 retail unless there was electronics or something really elaborate in it. So I didn't have a chance of doing, yes, the castle playset would have been the coolest part, but it would have been the most expensive part, and that you have to have enough kids buying into the dolls themselves before it's worth spending the money to go into the accessories. Mm-hmm. So
interesting.
Right. Your basic stuff covered.
Exactly. And you have to build the ground support for it, which made sense. Because if you look at all their factors, and I know that they must have had studies on this, but they probably have to sell 100 dolls before someone buys the horse, or those kind of things, and then or before they buy the accessory sets, and then so they have been doing it long enough that they had ideas in their head about how those things would work.
Just talking about those price points makes me so upset at the fact that it was only like $4 or $5. It's like, I want to go back in time and just buy the whole shelf full.
Yeah, I was thinking that was a good time to buy.
I know, right?
Only everything still costs those prices.
Oh my gosh, it's so sad. Because even the only thing that I can really think of as far as like toys today, and I'm thinking about like Barbie, and it's like, okay, like the doll is like $15, and then the castle's like $100 and something, and like accessory sets,
$15 if it's a base doll that doesn't do anything. If it's like a special doll, it's at
like
least
20, 25.
25.
Mm-hmm. Prices certainly have gone up, Greg.
Oh yes. In fact, it's I'm much older, so I remember when suddenly G.I. Joe, the 12-inch G.I. Joe hit the $10 price point, and that was. I remember kids who were upset about that, going, forget it, I'm going to buy Action Jackson, who's only half the size.
And half the fun.
Yeah, it was. And that was like one of the crappiest lines ever. And then I still get people on sites and things talking about how wonderful it was. It's like, do you have a bad memory? I mean, look at those toys. Well,
yeah, but the thing is that was within their price range, and their parents probably didn't want to spend too much money on something, so that's what their memories that they have.
And that's true. It's true. And actually, by the time G.I. Joe went to that $10 price point, they had also cut out so much quality that even it was funny because the toys were so badly engineered at that point that in the collector community, we now refer to those as the exploding G.I. Joe.
Oh, no. Like, because of, like, chemicals, or what happened?
No. They actually, in fact, I sold a female version of the Adventure Team just earlier this year, which actually sold for a bunch of money. And it was a beautiful doll, absolutely beautiful. It was done in Europe. But it was the exact same construction. And the reason we say it's a exploding one is while it was still in the package, never opened, the joints deteriorated and it fell apart.
Oh, no. That's so sad.
Yes.
Mm.
Yes. And I even just trying to sell it, the pieces were crumbling in my hands.
That's so sad. Well, speaking of European manufacturing, this is a good segue into our next conversation. So let's talk about the 12-inch fashion-sized Guinevere doll. From the photo, the only photo that it seems that we have, you had discussed that this was from, I believe, the London design team. So let's just kind of start that conversation then.
Okay, let me go backwards just a little bit here to set the frame. Hasbro at that time had only 3 real design teams. They had other ones for like smaller, they kept buying companies. So for a while they might have a design team over in Seattle where they just bought a new toy company. But there was 3 design teams. There was Rhode Island, which was the original Hasbro. There was Cincinnati, which was Kenner, which obviously was a huge design team and a lot of history and quality that they've been putting out for years. And then the third one was the London group. Now, I met people from the London group, and they were responsible for doing all of the Action Man products specifically. That was probably the biggest thing they did there because the G.I. Joe, jump around, I'll try to make this quick. G.I. Joe sold in Europe under the name Action Man because G.I. means general issue. It's literally an American term. So they had Action Man, and it sold the same time G.I. Joe did in Europe from 1964 to 1979, 78, anyway. And then it kept selling, even though Hasbro stopped selling it. They licensed it to a company named Palitoy, who was making the international version. So there was this huge version over huge markets still of that. And then when they resurrected G.I. Joe in the U.S., they resurrected Action Man for the European market, and it was a huge deal. It was tons and tons of stuff. It's just amazing. There's probably 1,000 SKUs of product. And so you had a very robust design team over there. And sometimes they would borrow some of the stuff I designed for G.I. Joe, and sometimes a lot of it I borrowed their stuff. And so evidently, so they also worked on Cindy, which Cindy was an established girls' property, a girls' fashion doll in the UK particularly. It sold very well. What I've heard different stories on this because I'm not an expert in this area, but I was told it sold really well until Hasbro bought it, tried to turn it into Barbie, and made her look like a harlot. And then the sales tanked after that. So then they no longer had this big line that they thought they had. They thought they bought the Barbie, but at the time, that Cindy doll was more of a cute girl next door, not a fashion model. And so it kind of
and the irony
up.
is that Barbie is based on the German kind of sexy doll. So
exactly, Lily. Yeah,
Lily. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So so they had a team there, and then they took the tooling from the Cindy doll, and they took one of the horses from Cindy. And because, as you mentioned, it was selling pretty well in France, they put together a real basic Starla and asked if we should do this. And ironically, so that was one part of this that happened, and that happened just about the same time as just before the line died. And I looked at the pictures and went, 12-inch figures are my passion. So I'm like, of course I want a 12-inch Guinevere. I've wanted one the entire time.
Mm-hmm. We did too.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, she would have been so cool. And I remember looking at it, and I remember that they said, Greg, you have kind of the authority here because you're the one pushing everything. Tell them how to make this so it can be right and fit with what you're doing, which I was looking forward to doing. Ironically, at just before that, one of the other designers at Kenner actually suggested it. And okay, this is being recorded, so I have to be careful what I'm saying here. They thought it would be a good project for that person, so it wouldn't affect other things. And so that person actually designed a very basic figure. And it was okay. She actually did some interesting soft goods. I mean, she basically copied what I had done on the figure, which wasn't bad. And so I actually handmade clear armor helmets. One set.
Plastic or fabric?
Plastic. So, because she wasn't capable of doing that part. And so I made one set of clear armor with the helmet, with a rotating visor, and visor, chest plate, probably greaves, and gauntlets.
I'm assuming that's discarded.
Actually, I sold it.
Oh, you sold it?
I sold it off already. But I can't. In fact, I was sitting here looking to see if I could find any pictures of it. Back to your comment, don't you copy everything before you get rid of it? And yes, I do. And so I may someday find those pictures, because I would have had to have had pictures if I did that. Mm-hmm. But I can't find the pictures. And I listed them pretty much just like what I said. This was the only ones that were done like that. And people had known that eBay store enough that there was enough real things coming from it. When it came out, they bought it. Someone bought it. I think there was only like one bid. Someone has that set. And so it was interesting because there really was a push to make a 12-inch Guinevere from two different angles. But the only one that the photograph exists is the one from the London office.
So was there ever a secondary doll itself since you made the armor, or was it only the Cindy doll that has really been ever made as a prototype?
Well, there was the other doll that the other designer made, where it really didn't look like that character. She took a Cindy doll also, because we had been I can't remember the timing. We worked on Cindy in Cincinnati when we were going to make a big push in the U.S. for Cindy. And I can't remember if the timing was before or after Guinevere. It was in that same time period anyway. And we'd ended up using some of that tooling for the Sabrina doll.
Oh, the Sabrina doll.
Yeah.
Yay. I love that doll.
So there was a doll made, but it was never a doll that was made a full presentation model was never made in the U.S. of a 12-inch figure.
I see. And it's interesting because I can talk about the other sets that I wish that we would have had the carriage. And yes, I made a carriage out of wood, but I would honestly say amongst fans, number one definitely are jewels. Everyone seems to have made their own power jewels. So that was probably the number one thing that probably would have sold after the dolls. But second is fashion dolls. Like, we get a lot of people who are like, oh, I'm making custom Jewel Rider dolls, or I'm going to make a custom, out of Barbie or something like that. So that's definitely something that a lot of the fans have taken to their own, creative ways and made their own dolls. So it would have definitely been very popular.
Yeah. I would have loved to have done fashion dolls for her. That would have been a blast.
Kickstarter, here we come.
Yeah.
Okay, Chris, you start it, and then everyone's going to pay, what was the last one, for the custom toys through Greg.
You find any way I can manage to make some more product on this, whether we, whatever we call it. I'm happy to do it.
We might have to take you up on that.
Let's call it the Pern Riders of Guardian.
Enchanted Camelot.
Exactly. Something that's nothing associated with the name. Oh, well.
But actually, I've been working on some dragons that I think you guys have been nice enough to put those links up. And actually, I did a new set of those dragons, 2 new ones, where a much lower price point, cute as a button. These new dragons, and basically they've just got a magnet and go around your neck. They're the Weirums. Mm-hmm. Amphimere, which is a dragon with wings but no legs, and they hang around the shoulders. They attach with a magnet. They're just beautiful, and I took them to a show, and of course everyone wanted them, but no one could pay the price because they were all handmade. But I'm working on a project with another company right now with a plush manufacturer, and if I can get these dragons made at a decent price, I may buy a container and see what I can do with them. Ooh. They are that stunning. That's like, I mean, you saw the ones that I did before, and these other ones
those were amazing.
Like my granddaughter, is still asking me when I'm making hers.
Aww. Do the lower price point ones also have light up eyes?
No, because that was one of the heavy expenses. The light up eyes and actually the frame. And frankly, I realized that the frame was useless. It's not useless. It's fun, but it was very expensive to put that in. And so what we did is we ended up, our favorite one, because my daughter's been helping me on this, is actually we did a sand-filled body, so it drapes on your shoulder beautifully. And then the only frame is in the wings, so you can pose the wings. So it was best of everything. Hung on your shoulder beautifully, had wings that were jointed. I wore it for a half an hour and forgot I was wearing it.
Ooh.
Yeah. And it was only held on by just the magnets of making a loop, so it hung around your neck, so that cut down cost too. So sorry, we're going way off of Guinevere, but I'm still trying to make some fun, interesting things to make this work. And yes, I would be more than happy to make anything that I can along those lines if we can get people interested.
I think the thing is that there is interest, but just I think going back to like what you were talking about with the price point of the original toys, I think that unfortunately it's just, especially with custom made toys, I don't think that there's a big enough audience, unfortunately, who can afford that. I think that's the only downside. So
no, actually that's it exactly, because the dragons that I was going to be, the dragons I have on Etsy, because they're all handmade, they're $400. Mm-hmm. And they've got all the electronics and stuff like that. And I made these other dragons to be, only a $200 price point. But frankly, if I can get this factory to work on them, I could probably sell them for $20 a piece. And
you'd sell a lot more. Yes,
yeah.
You would.
Yeah.
I've seen similar dragons for sale at nerd conventions. So, maybe the science fiction nerds and the anime nerds are your way to go.
Exactly. In fact, I think if I could be at a science fiction convention and have, like, I envision 2 trees in a booth full hanging with all these dragons on them, I'd probably sell every one in that situation.
Probably.
Yeah.
Or go to a Ren fair.
Yeah, Ren fair people have money. We're trying
Yes.
Well, I was going to say, or they're willing to spend it, on things like this.
Well, I just got back in touch with my old boss from Kenner, and she's actually doing handmade feltings of animals that are just gorgeous, just amazing. She's always had the most amazing drawing hand ever, and her plush looks like it. Her feltings look like it, and they've got frames and stuff. But she told me that I'm in the wrong selling space. I need to get off of Etsy, and she gave me sites of some plush toy sites for collector ones where the price points are between $200 and $1,000. She's like, this is where you need to be. These people will buy those dragons. So
I will help you advertise your custom non-Jewel Riders stuff.
That's right.
I would say I feel like Etsy has a price ceiling of about $60.
Yes.
Of what people would probably pay for a plush.
Yeah. And you're right. That's exactly what it is.
So speaking of toys, I know we did have a couple. I don't know. Did we finish the Cindy conversation? Was that kind of everything that you had?
That is everything. I wish there was more information on it.
No, it's all good.
I think I heard recently that Cindy is coming back, but her original look, her like
stuff,
cute pre-Barbie ripoff look.
Interesting.
It immediately makes me think of that other doll that's out there. I see her like cheap stuff everywhere. What is her name? Chris, do you know which one I'm talking about?
That's such a vague.
I know. I'm sorry, but I'm like totally not trying to be stereotypical. But whenever I go to the swap meets, it's always all of the Mexican ladies that always have these like dolls, and it's like there's like her house furniture and her everything. Like it's basically Barbie, but not the quality. Oh my gosh, it's gonna drive me crazy. Well, I'll think of it later.
But
anyway,
let me go one rabbit hole for you real quick.
Okay.
You had mentioned about Ken, and I'm dying to say this. One of the funny things that I learned when I first started at Mattel was Ken is not a doll. Ken is an accessory.
Oh, poor
that is
Ken.
exactly
Wasn't that a
how
quote from Toy Story, one of the Toy Story movies?
It might have been, and it was true. That is exactly how they treated it. Here's Barbie, and here's her friends, but then here's the accessories. And Ken, the Ken version was always an accessory. It was never a doll. And so
so bad.
Yeah. I brought that into when I was doing the Disney Classics. So because I did the Prince Philip doll, and I did the Prince. He's just called the Prince from Sleeping Beauty, and I went to go do the Prince from Snow White, who was just called the Prince also.
His name is the Prince, yeah.
Yeah, and I did a beautiful doll that was sold. Someone owns the prototype someplace. In fact, I just sold off the horse because there was supposed to be a horse, that horse from Snow White and the Prince and Snow White were going to be a set, but they didn't want another Prince, and so that's why in Snow White, I replaced the Prince SKU with the dancing dwarves. So it was Sleepy on the bottom, or Sneezy on the bottom, and Dopey on the top, and a big coat that went over the two of them. So it made that male figure to go play with, and it actually did pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the dwarves were in the movie a lot more than the prince, so
Right.
I think that would draw a lot more interest.
Yes.
I'd be interested to see if you have that prototype of the Prince then, because that was always kind of like my, like, oh, I need to find this. So I was always out looking for Prince dolls because he's very rare to find in general.
Yes. You know what? I'm sure I have it.
Yeah, I'd like to see it. I mean, I have a Prince eventually, and I know that they made one, I think, in the 70s, but yeah, they don't really have too many of him.
Yes.
Are we good with that rabbit hole?
Yeah, that was the whole thing there. Sorry.
But yeah, I think in the last Toy Story movie, there was a scene where Bo Peep brought Woody to like a party of toys, and they were like, "Oh, is this your friend that you were telling us about?" And then Bo Peep was like, "Oh no, he's just my accessory."
Ridiculous.
And one of my friends said that she was shocked when she heard Bo Peep say that line. She was like, "How could she say that?" But that might have been a reference to Barbie.
Probably was. Snow White Prince. I've got the pictures right here.
Oh, cool. You have to send it to me. I'm interested to see. Yeah, because like I said, Snow White's probably one of my top favorite films, and it's always sad that there's never the Prince, because I was that child who wanted the whole set. So it's so funny because even though I had the dwarves in that set, I was always like, I want the Prince. Like I'm glad I have the dwarves, but I want the Prince.
I think the Disney store might have released dolls of all the princes at some point.
Yeah, they have. Like I said, eventually there's all the characters that have been released, but it's just the fact that that's like my favorite series. So I wanted a Mattel one, not Jakks Pacific or whatever it is.
Actually, so I made the original Beast doll, and
I have that one.
And I had to hit a very tight price point. it was amazing that I actually achieved what I did on that price point.
Was that the one with the removable head?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. But
The purple
a
box.
few years later, yeah, purple box. And that one actually made the top. It was the only toy I know of mine that hit in the top 10 bestsellers of toys, because he sold at that time 1.2 million units. And if you look at that he was on shelf for $15 a piece. I mean, that's a lot of money.
Mm-hmm. And that's the boy character at that.
Yeah, exactly. Because he actually outsold Belle.
No.
Yeah,
Really?
For, not entirely, but he did. I mean, because that SKU was on the top 10 bestsellers, and Belle was not.
Wow. Well, I was going to say, I mean, the other princes, they're not necessarily the namesake, but to be a titular character like Beast or Peter Pan. Yeah, same with Aladdin, right. So like Beast, Peter Pan, Aladdin, you kind of expect those dolls to sell better because they're more the main character.
Yes. Well, and an odd thing was after that, after I left Mattel, so this would have been, actually it was right around the year 1998, I had a company come to me and ask me to make a version of that doll for the Disney stores. And so I made exactly what that Beast should have exactly looked like, without worrying about the price point. And it was a gorgeous doll. I had only one copy. I sold it off a long time ago. But
they never actually went through with it?
No, they sold it. It was on the market.
Oh, okay.
It was so there was a Beast doll that transformed into a prince, sold at Disney stores, roughly around the year, let's say 2000, just to be rougher there. And it was gorgeous. It had all the detail. It had a beautiful sculpted head. In fact, I got to art direct the sculpted head even.
Wait, okay, so it has a plastic head that you slip over it, and was the head attached to the cape?
Yes. Well, the one I had was.
Right, because I have that one. It comes with isn't it Belle's in her pink dress, and it was like a 2-pack gift set that was in a pink box? At least that's the one I'm thinking of.
I don't think I had that one. I think I bought the Beast like I had a Belle, but it was in her green dress, and if she was sold separately from the Beast, and the Beast was in his own box, and he had a plastic Beast head with a purple cape attached, and then when you took off the head, it was the prince.
I don't know.
Was that the one? Yeah. Was that the one where that head was just a rotocast shell of a head with no hair?
Yeah, that's the one I have. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry, that was a crappy one.
Oh, well, then which is the one you're talking about?
It was glorious.
Is it the Disney collector one? Is it the Mattel collector doll one?
No, this was sold only in the Disney stores.
Well, then I don't know which one it is.
Yeah. I'll have to see if I can find pictures of it. I don't recall offhand.
I found the rip-off Barbie, by the way. It's Gloria. Have you all heard of that one, the Gloria doll?
No. I have
to look it up. It's awful. But she's everywhere around Los Angeles. So you go to any swap meet, you're bound to find Gloria.
Wow.
Are those still happening right now?
Oh, I don't know. I don't buy them. It's just swap meet.
Nothing is happening in Los Angeles right now. Everything.
I just meant whenever you do go. I would always see them. But before we do get into a very long conversation, I know we had someone who wanted to ask questions about another toy that, Greg, you worked on, I believe.
The rocks.
Yeah. Stormy, you want to take it?
Okay.
I wanted to ask about treasure rocks because I really like treasure rocks.
So I didn't work on treasure rocks, but what I can tell you what I do know. So they were designed in Rhode Island by one of the teams there, and one of the girls' teams, and really cool toy, which was you had a nice acrylic jewel, solid acrylic jewel, which was expensive because it was so thick, so it had a longer molding rate time. but it was still, they were gorgeous jewels, and then they were covered in sugar, and they just, I don't know if they weren't marketed right or what, but they just didn't take off. And so my involvement with it was the marketing team was looking for a way to do a promotion. And so they found that those tools existed. And so they picked one or two of the shapes and had them run in a few different colors and then hid them in the package. Hid them as in they were in the blister, like behind the doll's shoulder blades. And the intention was, and there was a little blurb, a little violator in the lower right-hand corner that talked about it, free hidden jewel. And then they were only supposed to be on the first 3 months of shipments or something.
But yet they were in everything.
They were, because only those first 3 months of shipments happened. There was no
So
orders.
it was always in it.
Yes.
Just because they were the only shipment.
Sad.
How sad.
Now, I thought that I had one. I thought that there was some that shipped without it, and it may have been just that I signed off samples that were ready for production to be shipped that just had the missing jewel. Because I know that I saw them in package, but they may not have been on shelf in package, or if they were, very low numbers. So if you do actually find one, it would be incredibly rare.
It would be.
Yeah, because I remember they purchased a specific amount of jewels, like 1,200 jewels or something like that, or 12,000. I don't remember. I'm not good with a number unless I'm reading it off of something. But they knew exactly how many would have those special jewels, how quickly the run would happen, and then there just wasn't reorder after that.
Well, at least from archiving some of the other commercials, I have seen that Treasure Rocks was pretty early. Like I think that they had was it like a 93 commercial or 94, and then 95 when Jewel Riders was out, and I think that there was even like a 1996 commercial. So do you know if they had continued to produce it well kind of across a couple of years, or was it something that was just kind of like, no, we only made it and it just, for whatever reason, they kept selling product?
They don't work that way.
Okay.
They don't. They put out a product line and it sells or it doesn't. And if the toy companies don't reorder it, they stop making it. So now it's possible they put it out for 2 years. What I would have to do is I would have to go back to my Kenner catalogs and see if it shows up in more than 1 year of a catalog.
I don't even know if they are in the catalogs. Chris, do you remember seeing them? Are they? Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen Treasure Rock's catalog photos.
Yeah. So here's the thing: is the reason you may not have seen them is in that couple years of catalogs before Hasbro went to digital catalogs, is it was a binder and it had 4 or 5 inserts. One was the girls' toys one, which is where those Princess Guinevere pictures are from. And then there was one that was a boys' toys or an action figures one. And then there was other ones. There was a preschool one, and I think the other one may have been activities, something like that. So there was 4 or 5 insert ones that actually had a little metal loop on the spine of a special staple with a loop on it, and so they would fit in these binders. And I think I only have one set that may be complete, but they did that 2 years in a row, and I can look that up and see it should be in that catalog.
I just don't remember seeing them because we do have the Jewel Rider ones, at least so the 95 and 96 or whatever those years are.
Yeah.
Well, Stormy, did that answer your question? Or do you still have more questions?
It did. I am sad to hear that Greg did not actually work on the treasure rocks, because in the depths of my heart I had a secret hope that he could steal those molds for me. Because I've been trying to make molds so I can make my own treasure rocks.
Ooh.
And my mold making skills, not so good.
Well, now I'm just curious. Did you have these as a kid, or did you pick these up in later years?
I had them when they came out. I had them at the same time I was watching Jewel Riders. And in fact, the show and the treasure rocks.
Stormy used to mail me some with my Jewel Riders tapes.
Aww.
I don't remember that. That's very cool.
In fact, I remember one time you mailed me 2 sets, one for me and one for one of my friends, which was really nice.
See how many lives Stormy touched so early on in the internet days.
I seem to have done, and it makes me very happy now, even though I can't do these things at all.
Oh, that's okay. I never knew about the treasure rocks. It's just the only, and I think that it would have sold me on it was the song. I mean, the marketing for these things were amazing.
Yeah, the treasure rocks song is one of those things that'll, like, you know, in Inside Out, when they just go and they shove an old advertisement song into your brain. That's the treasure rocks.
That's so funny. I think I'm going to make a mashup of that scene and put treasure rocks. You just inspired me.
A funny story for you along these lines. I was at Mattel at this particular time, and the Hart family line was doing well. I mean, it was selling well, but they would never ship it on time. And so the retailers stopped selling it because it wasn't being shipped on time. And the reason it wasn't being shipped on time is because it was being run by the Barbie group. So they put it over in our group, and I was in charge of it for 1 year. And I worked on the Disney version of Hart Family. That was my year. But when that started, when it was turned over to me, I remember one of the marketing people bragging, "I got rid of that stupid Hart Family song." How do you forget that? It's the family with the heart. It was like, oh my gosh, what type of a moron are you? Any kid would whistle that song
exactly.
Or that song. Oh well.
That's so sad.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, why would you ever want to get rid of something that children remember forever?
Yeah,
Right.
Exactly. Impressionable marketing.
I don't get that. Well, and part of it is you had people there, and this is common, but you like Jill Barad would make decisions about what people want at Toys R Us, and she would have been the last person in the world to walk into a Toys R Us. And so it was always funny. And I think that particular marketing person was in that same ilk. Because I do remember that person showing up at a Disney meeting once, a Disney brainstorming offsite casual clothes. And her casual clothes that she wore, I know would have paid for a quarter of the clothes I owned in one outfit. It's like, okay, we didn't mean Gucci casual clothes today. Did you not get that memo?
Right.
Oh, well. And now I completely lost the train of thought we were on. But
We're talking about treasure rocks.
That is
like I said, I'm going to do an Inside Out video.
I actually managed to reuse the little jewels that came with the Jewel Riders dolls when I took a shop class and we were making these. It was like a wooden toy where you stretch a wire into a certain shape and then you try to put run a wired loop along it without making the light bulb go off, because if the two wires touch then the light bulb goes on. And I wanted to do one of a unicorn, so I think I put the light bulb on the unicorn's horn or something, but I wanted to cut the wood in the shape of the unicorn, and my teacher was like, that's way too complicated, just put it on a square. And I was like, but then it loses some of the effect. And they were like, well, you could use something nice to make it stand on or something. So I I glued 4 of the jewels that came with my Jewel Rider dolls to the 4 corners of the square, and that was the stand.
Okay.
Ooh, that sounds really cute.
Question for you.
Yes.
Did the jewels actually come out in blue?
But they were everything. Yeah,
Okay.
because there was blue as well, because Drake came with blue.
Okay.
And in fact, I think that sometimes he came with blue, sometimes he came with green. And then Kale also came with blue, I think. But
Look, the color of the jewel usually matched their jewel armor.
exactly, yeah, it was the color.
Right.
Sometimes though, but like Guinevere, Fallon, and Tamara always had the clear, the pink, and the yellow stones.
Okay.
But I was going to say, Chris, do you remember that we also used those as like the crown jewels? So like we would hide them and we would have the dolls search for them?
Yeah, I think in play they ended up being, stand-ins for the crown jewels or later wizard jewels or,
Right. So Greg, even though we never got doll-sized jewels, we still used those essentially for the jewels. So
exactly.
that was our play. That was our play feature.
I remember when I was doing that, I had found this Super Ball, which was about an inch diameter, but it was clear with glitter in it, and so I used that as an orb of power that my GI Joes had to go find. So I get it. But I did run across a bag in my odds and ends of 10 of those blue jewels, and I had them. I was going to sell them off at a show the other day. So I thought I'd let anyone know in case maybe I should put them on eBay.
Yeah.
So
see what happens. It looks like you sold that clear armor. Hey, someone might buy them. Just put them on. I think, like I said, I think it was mostly Lady Kale, but then also Drake would occasionally come with a blue jewel.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, any other thoughts? Any other things that anyone has questions about toys?
Any fun things you're working on right now, Greg?
Oh, actually, I am having a blast right now because there's a small railroad, the oldest surviving railroad in the United States, Strasburg Railroad in Pennsylvania. And they've got a little tiny theme park where you can go in trains, you can go on train rides and do some fun kid things. And part of their business also is restoring and fully functioning steam trains.
Steam trains.
They redo the ones for Disney World every couple of years when they need to be redone. And because of a Hasbro contact, they ended up reaching out to me, and I have designed characters for them to help draw more kid involvement into their world. I mean, because for the most part, if someone's going to a train yard like that, it's an old uncle or a grandpa going, "Hey, I want to show you trains." You haven't.
What's a train?
Exactly. And so what I did,
fax machines and trains.
But I went into a Best Buy once and I said, I'm looking for, what was I looking? It was a DVD something. And they looked at me funny. I said, it's probably next to your abacuses.
Right. That probably went over their head as well.
Carbon paper.
That's what I wanted, a portable DVD player, and they just looked at me like I was from Mars. And
oh my goodness, it's over there next to the carbon paper.
That's right.
Rotary phones.
Princess style, one for every room.
So I got to design these characters, and not just the look of the characters, the background story on the characters themselves, and designing toys. I'm actually working with the factory to get these toys made, and I'm currently making a walkabout costume for one of the characters right now, and we'll be doing a second one soon. And I actually showed up to their board meeting the other day. They told the board of directors that they were going to have a special guest, and here this giant bear jumps into their meeting. And it went really well. And I'm like, think of it this way. I did the whole speech about how you got to, show something the kids can relate to, connected to the train, so they want to get involved, and you step them up in this process, and you get, and then you need the fun of it. And so I came up with all these really cool slogan things for the bears that would be interested in the kids and tie into train stuff. And then I'm like, okay, so here's the elevator speech, Hollywood elevator speech. Larry the Cable Guy meets Smokey the Bear at a train yard. You know, which was a good way of describing that particular character, he was really fun. But anyway, that has been a blast. I have had so much fun doing that project, and it looks like there's a female character too that's kind of a Rosie the Riveter bear. And so you've got that female empowerment there too, which is kind of neat, and it's very timely. And so it's really neat doing these things, and I'm at an interesting stage where things are starting to break into a bunch of different directions, and it'll be interesting to see how things go. But I'm having fun at the moment.
Nice.
Yeah, got some good stuff going on.
All right, well, thank you so much to Greg and Lisa and Stormy for coming on the show today and sharing their toy memories and toy knowledge and Jewel Riders knowledge and everything with us. We had a great time, and we want to wish you all a very happy holidays and Merry Christmas if you celebrate. And if you want to find out more from the Jewel Riders Archive, you can find us at www.jewelridersarchive.com. And if you want to find out more from Lisa at the Princess Blog, you can find it at theprincessblog.org, where she writes about tons of great princess content, including Jewel Riders. And if you want to find out more from Greg, he has a brand new website, gregplaycreative.com. It's not quite launched yet, but hopefully by the time this episode goes live, you should be able to find some cool stuff there. And if you want to buy anything from Greg, you can visit his Etsy shop at etsy.com/shop/gregplaycreative. All right. Thank you guys so much for coming on. It's been a pleasure as always.
It's always fun to talk about toys.
Always. Yes. And if you're good, Santa might bring you treasure rocks for Christmas.
Will he really? You promise me? But I want a $4.99 Jewel Rider toy.
Not a $49.99 or a $400.
I was gonna say 49. I'm more like 109.
Yeah.
Greg, your things have inflated by about 4,000%.
Yeah, it is really funny seeing that now. It's like there's a certain time period when things get more expensive. That's like, okay.
Right. That was never the retail price point.
$50.
No. Well, and it's funny too. When I sold off some figures the other day, they were the Centurions, and they were selling, if you got it complete out of the package, $95. It's like for one figure. And it used to be that a G.I. Joe vintage was $100 for any figure complete. Well, now you can buy them for $20 because there's a lot of copies of them out there, and also kind of the age of people who were buying those now have grandkids and they're spending their money on those.
Right.
Would somebody tell that to the Moon Dreamers so I can buy one of them for not $70?
Maybe if you're good, Santa will give you one.
I sold off all my Moon Dreamers ones. Sorry.
And if they want to find out more about Jewel Riders, Chris, where do they go?
Yeah, you can find us at, like I said earlier, jewelridersarchive.com. Lots of great new content we just updated in the last couple of months. Lots of never-before-seen images and blog posts and all sorts of new information there. And if you want to find our social media, you can find us usually at Jewel Riders or at Jewel Riders Archive. And if you want to find out more episodes of this podcast, you can find us at jewelridersarchive.podbean.com for tons of great episodes featuring Greg, Stormy, and Lisa, and all of the circle of friends for Jewel Riders. And as we always like to say at the end of our podcast, friends together, friends forever.
Friends forever. Bye, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye.